Well, we are arriving to the end, and now it was scheduled the conference by Armando Peruga. He's not attending, as we have explained early this morning. And what we have thought is to have a panel with all the speakers we have had and trying to put together some of the missing questions or questions that have raised now, and just have a common debate during the next 10 or 15 minutes, and then the end of the symposium. So I invite Francisco, Marisa, Martina, and also Joan Ramon Villalbí, who will be moderating this roundtable. Joan Ramon, Dr. Villalbí, Joan Ramon, yes, to the table.
It's a long table.
Okay, so thank you very much, Joan Ramon, for coordinating and moderating this roundtable. Dr. Villalbí, let me introduce him. Is one of the tobacco control experts in Spain and in Europe. He served as president of the National Committee for Smoking Prevention some years ago, when the committee was created, I think. No, the second one, perhaps. And he works at the Public Health Agency of the city of Barcelona. He has been involved in primary healthcare and the developing of many programs linking primary healthcare with public health and introducing research and interventions in alcohol, other drugs, tobacco, and other hot topics in public health. So he's a good friend too, and it's a pleasure to have him here to moderate this debate. Thank you very much.
Well, it's, I don't know, I wanted to listen to Armando, so this was quite a trick because we were all missing him. But I think we're closing this symposium in a way, and almost the formal closure will be afterwards. But what I'll try to do is try to list some of the impressions that I've received during the sessions. And share them with you and see to what extent we all share the same ideas, and eventually have some discussion in the table with all participants about it too. I think this has been a very, very productive symposium. We've seen old friends, we've made new friends, and most of us know much more about the issue than a little while ago. I think that's a common feeling. In fact, all of us have learned a lot about electronic cigarettes over the last year, because as a matter of fact, about a little bit more than a year ago, there were 4 points of sale for electronic cigarettes in this town, and then suddenly we had more than 100. And so obviously something was happening, and it was becoming a real issue. So we've learned a lot, we know much more than before, but still there are many gaps in our knowledge. There's lots of things we don't know. This is all very recent, and it's taking time to develop the knowledge base, the scientific base, that will guide decisions. So in many ways, when we don't know enough, when we discuss about values. I think Marisa was pointing at this when showing those 4 layers, and we were discussing about values. And of course, disputes on values are very hot disputes, and we've seen a lot of this, not in this room, but around us over the last months. I think that there's mainly 5 issues. One is safety. Safety to users, safety to others. We know a lot more than before about this. In just 1 year, perhaps 2 years, the pile of information, of evidence has been growing fast. We know there are some risks that seem to be there. Of course, it's the risk of active tobacco smoking are far more, but we know that this is not. Nobody can pretend that this is a safe product. And we have significant information on this. Other issue is the use for quitting. There's a lot of claims about this, but the evidence is rather scarce and weak and based on studies that have lots of flaws. Simon was pointing at some this morning, how amazing we could have Simon, who's on the other side of the earth. If we dig a hole, we would end up in his office. And he was here. So we also have anecdotal evidence that people have quit because of or using electronic cigarettes. So there's some margin for it, especially at the beginning, but we need more information. I'm sure there are trials taking place, and that we will probably know much more, and we'll have much more solid evidence about this in a little while. So now let's look at it with a prudential and proportionate perspective. The other big issue is harm reduction. And harm reduction here, I think we must look at it in two ways. One, I'm an epidemiologist and public health man, so it's a population level, and that's one perspective. But the other is the clinical, the individual level. Sophia was pointing at it before. People who are doing clinical work with heavy smokers who cannot quit, people who are mental patients who are smoking 3 packs a day and seem unable to quit. They are facing hard, tough individual situations. And of course, we cannot recommend clinical guidelines use electronic cigarettes, but there are situations that must be dealt with carefully. As a matter of fact, I haven't heard or read much about the perception of electronic cigarette users about electronic cigarettes. I'm surprised. It may be that I'm too dumb to find it, but I'd like to have good data on it. The other issue is this a gateway to addiction among kids? And of course, it's less than a year ago, in September last year, the Morbidity Mortality Weekly report came out with the North American data that scared us a lot, because over a very short time period, the use by teenagers had grown tremendously. And of course, in probably 2 months, we'll have the next bulletin, because this is the ongoing yearly study on school students, high school students. So we don't know what's happening there. We don't have a lot of information. This is all very recent. And finally, the more concerning issue for most of us, and I think Marisa has summarized it wonderfully, and also Simon, is marketing. Marketing, the promotion of smoking through the promotion of electronic cigarettes, blurring the messages of the public health and the smoking control, the prevention movement, and vaping, where we had cleared the air from smoke, becoming widespread. These are the tough issues that scare us a lot. Now here, the European directive has brought some positive inputs, and I think that Paco has summarized very, very nicely. And we shouldn't, over the next 1.5 years, we should see the directive translated into national legislation in all member states. I'm also very sorry that the Spanish government didn't do it at the beginning, because it was finalizing a piece of legislation, and it opted to wait until the final. Well, this tells a lot. However, I'd like also to point out that the e-cigarettes battle is part of the very large, much larger tobacco war. It's one front, and we have achieved a tremendous lot over the last 10 years in Catalonia, in Spain, in Europe. If we compare where we were and where we are at, this has changed a lot. Well, Simon shows that the Australian data with 13% prevalence. Wow. Countrywide, 30% prevalence in a country that used to have very high prevalence. In Spain, we're still 20-some percent of daily smokers. Possibly 1% of e-cigarette users, and most of them are among the smokers. So this puts the things in perspective, because we still have a tobacco war to win. and the e-cigarette front is one part of it, an important part of it, because it's opening fronts that we thought were solved, but it's one front of it. So these are a bit the issues that have been going through during this session, and I wonder to what extent they are shared by everybody in this table. Tina?
Well, I see 4 points of interest in our debate. First is to protect our young people before the onset of smoking e-cigarettes or I would say e-inhalation products. Please remember this new trend in Germany and in other European countries of e-shishas to go without nicotine or with nicotine or whatever. And also to protect them for new inhalation lifestyle where they mix up different substances such as flavors or drinks or alcohol or maybe also drugs. It's possible to do it through the internet. It's very clear. So that means we must protect our children, young people, and ban all forms of advertising for tobacco, for e-cigarette or inhalation products in the internet. This is crucial. And also to ban the sales in the internet. Because if you can mix it up with so many, you have so variation and so different lifestyles coming up for the new generation, I think this is a concrete danger. And I see this danger now. The second point is to assist and to help smokers to quit. So far, I cannot see from our clinical trials that there is really a story of success quitting by e-cigarettes. It's not. The data are very uncertain, and it's not clear. Obviously, they try. Desperate smokers try to quit with e-cigarettes, but fails and relapse again, or they use it in a dual use. But the complete quitting by e-cigarettes, we have so far, no single clinical trial, and this after 3 years of use. The third group is the ex-smokers. So we must protect our ex-smokers not to start again with e-inhalation products. So this is a question of relapsing, to prevent the relapse. And the fourth group is the whole population regarding smoke-free areas. We have to protect our smoke-free areas and not allow to use e-inhalation products and the aerosol in our smoke-free areas. And these are the tasks for all of us to be active and to act and to also to communicate these messages to our regulators and to our media. Thank you.
Thank you, Martina. Thank you so much. I will invite Marisa to continue.
Yeah, this is a fascinating time to be working in tobacco control again. I just had a feeling that everything was under control with plain packaging and everything. It kind of felt like, we were kind of there. And this is certainly in the UK in particular become an incredibly interesting, hot, divisive topic. And it's been very unsettling to see, a strong research community, not agreeing on something for the first time in about 20 years. So, that's, for me personally, working in this new area of tobacco, because I come from a pharmaceutical background, was quite challenging personally. And the mudslinging, what I mean by that, the criticism, like Simon said this morning, that he gets, horrible messages. I get hate mail as well. I thought it was just when I was speaking about bad pharma, but actually this is something quite unique. Legal threats. So even when I go on air sometimes to talk about it on the radio, once I was up against a a lobby group that is funded by the tobacco industry. And when I put forward some critical but cautious, remarks about e-cigarettes, on a population level, just putting forward the arguments about industry, tobacco industry, and marketing, and concern potentially for youth uptake, potentially, I was accused of killing people, because there is evidence that people are stopping. So do I want to kill people? And hearing someone ask you that question on air in a very provocative way by a group that's funded by the tobacco industry is very, very challenging. So we're entering quite difficult, challenging waters. And I think it's really important, again, to stay true to the research and to be driven by evidence, because a lot of what we say is being dismissed as anecdotal or polemic. So to remember that evidence is going to help us and make us more credible. But I would agree with Martina that children have to be protected. And while we don't know what's going to happen, we know that kids experiment with everything. That's what kids do. We also know that, well, certainly in Scotland, we've got some new figures out. ASH Scotland, different from ASH London, ASH UK, ASH Scotland, commissioned a survey of young people, which I think was just published this week or last week. And 13 to 14-year-olds, we know that a quarter, so 25% have tried them, and close to half of 15 to 18-year-olds have used them as well. Okay, and we know that 78% of those who've used the devices had tried normal cigarettes. So we've got 80% of them saying that they've heard of the flavors, and 45% of non-regular smokers in this age category said that they wanted to try them because of adverts that they'd seen, and 57% saying, these are young people, saying that they could be influenced by the advertising. And I was really shocked because I was doing a very unrelated project on assessing smoking awareness campaigns in secondary schools in a part of Scotland for the NHS. And I was just asked to go in and see whether or not these smoking awareness campaigns were having an impact on kids. So I came up with a new innovative way of engaging with children, or they'd be very angry if I call them children, because they think they are young adults. 14 to 16-year-olds. I put a little radio station. I created a radio station for them and assessed their norms and their perceptions of smoking through radio dramas and through radio news quizzes and through radio factual interviewing to get them to engage. And I spoke to almost 200 14 to 16-year-olds across 7 different schools. And unprompted, e-cigarettes was not a part of my research design at all. It was just assessing smoking. E-cigarettes came up in every single school, in every single group. High levels of awareness, high levels of experimentation, a lot of them talking about flavors, including Red Bull. Some people saying everyone has them, one kid showing me how to use them. And I realized at that moment that we don't know where this is going. We don't know if, some of them are saying that some kids then went on to smoke real cigarettes, but we can't say that this effectively proves a gateway effect. But it made me realize that more research is needed. And we need to watch this because it's incredibly, I don't know if any of you were smokers in the past. Nicotine's very, highly addictive, and we don't want them to start, that's for sure. So I would echo, this has been a great opportunity to kind of help us think about the bigger picture. And yes, absolutely, for quitters, people who are using it and are helping, and it's helping them quit, that's great, absolutely. But what happens if more people are starting and we just don't know? So, in terms of public health, there are much bigger questions out there, particularly now that the tobacco industry is well and truly leading the way in this market.
Thank you, Marisa. I'll invite Paco to continue and have Esteva for the last word.
Well, I would like to say some things, because I don't want that no one would believe that we say things just without just to talk or just to say. When electronic cigarettes came to our lives, we first we saw them as an intruder, because really they mimic what I was trying to explain before. So, but after that we tried to be very cautious, and we tried to explain that we think that every new product, it has been tested, it needs, we can't accept in Europe that what it has been said without proving that. I'm really concerned about what was being told before about if you go to a shop of electronic cigarette, you ask something, you receive information that is not serious, and that's something that with the new regulation I think it will change. I think the consumers will have more information. From the science, I think it's very, very important to have more data. We have not really enough, and probably Esteve could explain the big problems that we have to have really a large number of clinical trials, independent, not financed by the tobacco or electronic cigarette industry, with large number of patients, long in the time, not short-term studies, because many other effects will be discovering in a long term. So that's very important to know, to have all the data and then to decide. I think the messages must be very, very clear. And going to the regulation, the political aspects and so on, it's not, well, we have good relationship in the committee with the government. I think the government is doing what has to do. Our government will transpose the directive without any chance to do other thing. The directive must be transposed. They must implement measures to comply with the directive, and they will do, I'm sure they will do that, and they will do it shortly, I think. But in the meantime, what has been the problem? Not the Ministry of Health. We had a good relationship. The Ministry of Health is, I think the Ministry of Health is taking care of the health of the Spanish citizens. But what's happening? Now we had a law that some politicians that are members of the Parliament, in the Congress, in el Congreso, en el Senado, in the Congress, in the Senate, well, they are saying things, but they are not the ministry. In the government, I think it must have a balance between the health positions, the economical position, the agricultural positions. That's normal, but the health ministry has to defend the health of the citizens. And I think when they are in contact with the health professions, it's very clear what we transmit them and what we are trying to claim from them. That is the precaution and to take care of the health of the citizen. But for us, it's terrible to try to explain to politicians that work in health commissions in our parliament, and to send information to say what's the opinion of the health professions, and to have to read 2 months ago to one of the speakers of the health commission in the Senate that says there's no evidence scientific. I'm reading her declaration, it's a lady, that the vape, that in the electronic cigarettes, the only that it has been discovered is water. That has been said 2 months ago. It has been published in the media, and we have to accept that. The only that I from my committee ask to my politicians, the Spanish politicians, is please hear us. Please give us the opportunity. I think everyone has to say something. The people who is selling electronic cigarettes has its role, has to say whatever will be. But health is health. Health professionals has our role here, and we are who must assess, and we must inform our politicians to legislate. We don't want to legislate, but we want that our politicians, when legislate, have in mind many aspects, have a prudent attitude, and of course I think that will be the way to go forward. So clear messages, and I would like that Esteve, because I have heard him sometimes talking about the problem of the science to really give us solution. I would like to know exactly the risks or not of electronic cigarettes. I would like to know if it's possible or not to have enough information, enough demonstrations of one or other, in one side and in the other. But we need to know. We need to know before taking decisions.
Tough job, Esteban. Yes, you asked for it.
Okay, Francisco, thank you very much for the question. Well, I believe that many of ours have had this, or have this question in mind, and would do the right study to get the right answer to the questions we have. I believe it's a very difficult field of research because there are several topics. One type of research would concern about the effectiveness of electronic cigarettes as cessation aids. So we know that what is needed are clinical trials, well conducted, as you have said, independent, if possible, from the pharmaceutical companies, from the electronic cigarettes and tobacco industry, etc., with a large amount of people, including different sample of population, etc. And I assume that researchers all over the world are doing such studies. The first study we have had would not enough to answer the questions. It has a great press coverage and so on, but it was a bad study with a small sample size, with a lot of biases, so errors in the design and in the conduction. So we need more studies, well conducted. This would be the part of cessation. But there are other important questions, such as whether electronic cigarettes are harmful or not. And I believe this is an even more difficult question because most users at this point are former or continue to be smokers. So the effects of e-cigarettes are confused by the effects of smoking during years. It would be a silly situation, I should say, for those trying to say e-cigarettes are harmful, whether in the next year or in 5 years, every lung cancer or every myocardial infarction diagnosed in e-cigarette smokers, e-cigarette users, should be attributable to e-cigarettes because we know that they were smokers and they had a risk because they were smokers, and that risk doesn't disappear immediately after quitting traditional cigarettes. So defending such a situation would be not a good scientific approach. On the other hand, saying that, well, cigarettes are safe because we are not seeing now effects on health is also a non-scientific approach because we assume that most of their effects will come in decades, such as occurred with tobacco smoking. The epidemic of lung cancer, that was the first disease clearly related to smoking, appeared in the late 1940s in the United States, the UK, and some Nordic countries at the beginning of the 50s of the past century. Whereas the population began to smoke 30 to 40 years before. So there is a natural history of the diseases that have to be considered. And this is a problem because we need to wait and we need good studies. Good studies theoretically done in people who has only used e-cigarettes. So it's more difficult. I believe in this sense the classical epidemiological approach would not be the clue to this problem. But on the other hand, we may use laboratory research and experimental research to see the effects of e-cigarettes on animal models or even in humans in lab conditions. So now some studies are studying lung function in e-cigarette smokers, reactivity in inflammation related to cardiovascular diseases, for example, after the acute exposure to e-cigarettes. But this is only a small part of the picture because, as it has been said, the exposure is chronic. E-cigarette users are vaping thousands of times per day, and there is no control about the substances they are inhaling. So it's a pity. I have dreamed with a nice study to address all these questions, and even with a couple of million euros, I don't know whether I would be able to address the question, because it's a very sophisticated and complicated research question. Trying to address all these questions with only one single study would be also a bizarre scientific approach. We need all the pieces of the puzzle and to try to have a good overview, and without non-scientific positions saying this is harmful and I want to demonstrate that this is harmful, or in the contrary, other colleagues that are saying this is the panacea, we have the key to finish with the tobacco epidemic and with all the deaths caused by tobacco. I don't believe that we have to do research from these positions. Scientists coming from medicine, from biology, from physics, or from engineering, because all these types of scientists are doing research on electronic cigarettes, have to have open minds and try to do the best work in the specific area they are skilled. So, I'm sorry, I haven't answered the question, but I believe that these are some points that can be taken into account, and so thank you.
Well, I think these four positions have summarized a lot of the key points. So we have these key areas in protection of young people, in knowing that we still don't have information about utility for quitting. We are concerned with e-cigarettes as a gateway to relapse, and we are extremely concerned on the population-wide effects, weakening the smoke-free policies that we had developed over the last years across most of our countries. And in fact, yes, solved issues, or issues that seem to be solved, are open again. And the war is not over. It reopens in many fronts, and there are new threats. And we don't know much of what's happening among teenagers, and there are causes for concern. And still, we need to deal with politics, science, ministries, media, parliaments, and of course, science and evidence-driven policies and actions are always the key feature in public health. But here, never regulation and policy has been only subject to science. There's other things that are present, and so we need to keep this into account. So science is again hardly needed, but it's going to be difficult, and the trials, the studies will have to be coming from different fields and perspectives and disciplines, and there are methodological difficulties for them. And still we need to continue, and still we need to work, and that's what most of us do all of the time. So I think that's about all we could take out of this final table. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Joan Ramon, Martina, Francisco, and Marisa, and Esteve. And now we are beginning the closing. We are closing the symposium. I invite Dr. Tarsila Ferro. She's here, and we briefly, yes. Dr. Tarsila Ferro is the nursing director of the Catalan Institute of Oncology. Before her closing words, I just wanted to add two final points. First of all, one thing that we haven't done at the beginning of the symposium that I believe that is also of interest is a disclosure of the conflict of interests of the symposium organization. We haven't received no money. We have received no money from the pharmaceutical industry nor from the tobacco industry or e-cigarette industry. And all the symposium has been funded by specific grants from the government of Catalonia, from the Department of Universities and Research and the Department of Health, a contribution from the Cancer Plan of Catalonia, and also a contribution from the Spanish Organization of Medical Colleges. And part of the symposium has also financed by money from the own Catalan Institute of Oncology. I believe this is important to say, and you may see in the website of the symposium all the participants and how they have contributed to the symposium. Finally, I want to thank the collaboration of all the members of the Tobacco Control Unit here at the Catalan Institute of Oncology that have worked very hard during the last months and during this last week to have all ready for today and for the development of the symposium. I want to hope not to forget anybody. I want to thank Olga, Mercè, Anna, Laura, Montse, Cristina, Marcela, Chisca, and also other staff from ICO, such as Georgina Jungueras, and also a collaborator, Tony, who has made some of the pictures. So thank you very much for all of them. And finally, I want just, before giving the word to Tarsi, to thank all of you who have made possible the debate, who have come from Barcelona, from other cities in Spain, from distant cities even. You have made possible the debate, and even I want to thank those twittering bizarre messages during all the day. Thank you very much.
Well, for finishing, good afternoon. We are close to this event. As Esteba said before, I am the Director of Nursing representing our General Director, Dr. Calle, who he can be not here today due to the problems, the agenda problems. So just some words to congratulate you for this symposium. And only the knowledge, the commitment, especially the tenacity are the way to face the continuous challenges that we have in tobacco control, as recently electronic cigarettes. So congratulations for all of your work, and especially I would like to thank Dr. Fernandez and his team, their work to hold the meeting here today. So thank you.